My name is Lillian Ross. I'm 35 years old, and 3 years ago, I opened my front door to my parents and unknowingly let chaos move in with them. I live in Chicago. I work in financial consulting. Numbers, contracts, risk assessments. It's stressful, but steady. My boyfriend, Daniel Carter, runs a small boutique downtown. Between the two of us, we make around $200,000 a year. Not wealthy, not flashy, just comfortable. We bought our single-story house 8 years ago. A quiet neighborhood, a front lawn, enough space for our daughter Ava to chase fireflies in the summer. It wasn't a dream life people brag about online, but it was ours, and it was peaceful, until that Saturday morning. It was just past 8 a.m. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when Daniel called from the kitchen. "Lily, someone's at the door." I remember walking toward it, still barefoot, and then I froze. My mother stood there, smiling too brightly. My father looked tired, but composed. And behind them, Ethan, my 24-year-old younger brother, eyes glued to his phone. Their car was parked crookedly at the curb, suitcases stacked high. My stomach dropped. "We came a little early," Mom said sweetly. "Hope we're not bothering you." I stepped aside automatically. "Come in." Ava squealed when she saw them. Daniel immediately put on more coffee. Everything looked normal, but something felt off. Once they settled in, I asked casually, "Are you going on a trip? That's a lot of luggage." The air changed instantly. Dad clasped his hands together. "Our family business went under, Lillian." The words landed like a crack through glass. "What do you mean went under? Last year you told me profits were over 6 figures. "I made a bad investment," he said quietly. "The bank seized everything, the house included." He slid a thick file across the table. Dissolution notice, bank statements, seizure documentation. It looked legitimate, and I trusted him. Mom leaned forward. "We have nowhere else to go. Can we stay here, just for a few months?" Ethan finally looked up. "I'll get a job soon. I'll figure something out. We won't be a burden." The word burden echoed in my head. Daniel gently touched my arm. "I'll help make more coffee," he said softly. In the kitchen, I stared out the window at their overloaded car. "I was thinking," I whispered, "maybe we rent them a small apartment nearby." Daniel stirred his coffee slowly. "If it were my parents," he asked gently, "would you do that?" His voice carried something deeper. Daniel had lost both his parents in a car accident the year before. Family meant something fragile to him now, sacred. "They just lost everything," he said quietly. "Please don't make them feel abandoned." I swallowed. 10 minutes later, I returned to the living room. "How long?" I asked directly. Mom looked at Dad. Ethan answered, "At least 6 months." I held his gaze. 6 months, no more. And that was the moment my home stopped being only mine. The first 2 weeks felt almost warm. Ava loved bedtime stories. Mom cooked. Dad fixed a loose cabinet hinge. But slowly the shift began. The living room was never empty. The kitchen was always busy. Daniel started coming home later from the boutique because dinner for 6 became overwhelming. Ethan? He did nothing. Headphones in, laughing at TikToks, gaming at midnight. No job applications, no interviews. After 2 months, I hired a part-time housekeeper. Our expenses doubled. Utilities, groceries, insurance adjustments. Every month I watched the numbers climb. And I work in finance. I noticed numbers. But what I didn't notice yet was the beginning of something far worse. 6 months came and went, and nobody mentioned leaving. One evening, I called a family meeting. "It's been 6 months, I said calmly. "What's the plan?" Silence. Mom's voice turned fragile. "We're getting older, Lillian. Starting over isn't easy." I turned to Ethan. "What about you?" He crossed his arms. Dad jumped in. "He's under pressure." "No," I said firmly. 1 month. If he doesn't have a job by then, he can't stay." Mom's expression hardened. "We raised you for over 20 years, and now you turn your back on us?" Guilt. There it was. Daniel squeezed my knee gently under the table. "We'll figure something out," he said diplomatically. But I saw the exhaustion in his eyes, and I realized something that night. Kindness, without boundaries, becomes permission. And I was starting to feel less like a daughter, and more like an open wallet. After that family meeting, nothing changed. Not a single job application from Ethan. Not a single thank you from my parents. Not even the smallest shift in behavior that said they understood how close they were to the edge. Instead, they settled in deeper. Like my house wasn't a temporary shelter, but a permanent landing spot. Every morning, I woke up earlier to the sound of the TV already on in the living room. My mother liked the news loud. My father liked the commentary louder. Ethan liked to sleep until noon, then roll out in sweatpants and take over the couch like it belonged to him. Daniel tried. God, he tried. He'd lay out breakfast plates with a smile. He'd ask Dad if he needed anything. He'd include my mom in little errands, like choosing new curtains for the kitchen, like we were all just one big happy unit. But I started noticing the tiny moments that didn't match the family sticks together story they kept selling. Like how my mom would buy herself fancy yogurt and fruit cups and label them with her name in the fridge, but never asked if Ava wanted one. Like how my dad would leave his medication receipts on the counter on purpose, right where I'd see them, like a silent bill. And Ethan? Ethan had a talent for being comfortable in other people's sacrifice. He'd order delivery almost every day. Not cheap delivery either. Sushi bowls, steak burritos, bubble tea. And when I finally asked him where the money was coming from, he shrugged like I was annoying him. Mom and Dad have some cash saved. Something in me tightened. Saved? I didn't push it then. I should have. Because the month I gave him, the ultimatum, it came and went like it never existed. On the last day of that deadline, I came home and found Ethan in the living room with his feet on my coffee table, laughing into his headset. Daniel was in the kitchen, scrubbing dishes alone. Ava was upstairs doing homework by herself, and my parents were sitting at the dining table, casually playing cards. No one looked up. No one said, "Hey, Ethan's got an interview tomorrow." No one said, "We found a solution." Nothing. Just comfort. I stood there for a moment, my purse still on my shoulder, and the strangest feeling crawled up my spine. It wasn't anger yet. It was the realization that they didn't think I was serious, that my boundaries were just noise they could wait out. I cleared my throat. My dad finally looked up. "Oh, you're home." I nodded slowly. "We need to talk." My mom's face tightened immediately, like she already knew what I was about to say, and was preparing her defense. Ethan didn't even pause his game. I turned toward him. "Turn that off." He waved me away without looking. "Hold on." My voice sharpened. "Now." That got his attention. He pulled his headset off like I'd insulted him. "What's your problem, Lillian?" "My problem?" I almost laughed. Instead, I said calmly, "You promised you'd start working. You've done nothing. The 1-month extension is over." My dad leaned forward fast. "Lillian, don't start this again." My mother's voice rose, that soft sweetness gone. "You don't understand how hard this is for him." "For him?" I repeated, stunned. "What about us?" Daniel froze in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in his hands, his expression careful. He looked like he wanted to disappear. I hated that. I hated that my house had turned into a stage where my boyfriend had to tiptoe around my family's dysfunction. I looked Ethan in the eye. "You have 1 week," I said. "Either you get a job or you move out." Ethan snorted. "You can't just kick me out." My mother slapped her hand on the table. "We raised you. Everything you have is because of us." There it was again. That line. The one that always worked when I was younger. The one that turned gratitude into chains. I inhaled slowly. I didn't ask to be born. Silence. My mother's eyes widened like I'd slapped her. Daniel stepped forward gently, voice low. "Lily." I looked at him and softened for half a second. Because Daniel wasn't my enemy. He was the only reason this house hadn't exploded months ago. But then my father spoke again, sharper now. "So this is what you've become. Cold. Ungrateful. Cold." That word hit differently coming from him. Because I wasn't cold. I was exhausted. And exhaustion, when ignored long enough, starts to harden into something that looks like cruelty. I turned away before I said something irreversible. That night, Daniel and I lay in bed in silence. The lights were off, but I could feel him awake beside me. Finally, he whispered, "Do you think they'll actually leave?" I stared at the ceiling. "I don't know," I admitted, "but they're not even trying." Daniel's voice was quiet. "They're scared." I let out a short breath. Scared doesn't explain Ethan acting like this is his dorm. Daniel didn't argue. He just reached for my hand. And I realized something else. Daniel's kindness wasn't the problem. My family was using it like a weapon. A week later, I got my answer. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Ordinary, boring, the kind of day that should have ended with dinner and Ava's bedtime stories. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a bank alert. A charge of $10,200 has been made on your credit card. For a second, my brain didn't process it. Then the blood rushed out of my face. My hands went cold. I grabbed my wallet. My credit card wasn't there. I checked again, then again. Nothing. The air around me felt too thin to breathe. My phone rang almost immediately after. "Unknown number," I answered. A man's voice, irritated and clipped. "Lillian, it's Brian, your neighbor." My stomach dropped further. "Your house is shaking," he said. "The music is insane. Cars are blocking my driveway. There's a DJ. It looks like a nightclub." My mouth went dry. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible." "It's possible," he snapped. "Fix it." The call ended. And for a moment, I just stood there in the middle of my office, hearing only the roar of my own heartbeat. My mind tried to make it make sense. But deep down, I already knew. There was only one person in that house careless enough and entitled enough to turn my life into a joke. I grabbed my coat, told my boss I was leaving, and walked out without waiting for permission. As I drove home, my hands clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I wasn't thinking about Ethan anymore. I was thinking about my parents, about how they'd defended him, about how they'd minimized every warning sign, about how they'd sat at my table and called me cold for wanting him to work. And now, $10,200. A number so sharp and unreal it felt like someone had carved it into my skull. When I turned onto my street, I saw the cars before I even reached my driveway. So many cars, so much noise, so much movement. My home, my quiet, hard-earned peace, had been turned into a spectacle. And as I parked, I stared at the front yard decorated with balloons and banners like it was some kind of celebration. My celebration, my money, my humiliation. I stepped out of the car. The bass thumped through the walls. And before I even reached the door, I heard Ethan's voice, loud, careless, drunk on attention. "Happy birthday to me!" I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I just walked forward, one step at a time, like something inside me had finally gone numb. And when I pushed open my front door, I saw the full scale of what he'd done. DJ booth, strobe lights, fake smoke, strangers spilling drinks onto my furniture, my daughter's home, my boyfriend's home, my life, and Ethan standing on top of my table like a king. When his eyes met mine, his smile faltered for half a second, just long enough for him to understand. This wasn't another argument he could wait out. This was the moment everything snapped, and in my pocket my phone felt heavier than it ever had. Because I already knew what I was about to do next. I didn't yell. I didn't ask what he was thinking. I didn't even look at my parents, who were standing near the kitchen like stunned spectators at a show they hadn't expected to get out of hand. I simply pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and dialed 3 numbers. 911. The dispatcher answered calmly. "Emergency services, what is your emergency?" "My credit card was stolen," I said, my voice steady, almost detached. "Over $10,000 was charged without my permission. The person who did it is currently inside my home, hosting a party." There was a pause. "Are you safe, ma'am?" "Yes. Officers are on the way." I hung up. The music cut off mid-beat. Someone had turned the volume down, then off entirely. Whispers rippled through the room. Did she just call the cops? Oh my God. Chairs scraped, glass shattered. A girl in heels nearly tripped running toward the door. People shoved past each other, desperate to disappear before accountability arrived. I didn't move. I just stood there. Ethan jumped down from the table and stormed toward me, face flushed, jaw tight. "What the hell are you doing, Lillian?" I looked at him. Ice. That's what I felt. "You're asking me?" I replied quietly. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" "It's just a party," he snapped. "You're overreacting." Overreacting? I pulled up the bank notification and turned the screen toward him. "You stole my credit card. You charged $10,200. His eyes flickered. For a split second, fear. Then defiance returned. "I was going to pay you back." "With what?" I asked. "You don't even have a job." That hit, harder than anything else I'd said. My mother rushed forward. "Lillian, calm down. We can talk about this." "No," I said without raising my voice. "We're past talking." 15 minutes later, the police arrived. 2 officers stepped into the wreckage of what used to be my living room. Sticky floors, overturned stools, confetti crushed into my carpet. I handed them my phone and the transaction record. "That's him," I said, pointing directly at Ethan. The officers approached him. "You'll need to come with us for questioning." He looked at me like I'd betrayed him in some unimaginable way. "I can't believe you," he muttered. I folded my arms. "Believe it." As they escorted him outside, my mother broke down. "He's your brother," she cried. "You don't call the police on family." My father's voice was harder. "You've gone too far." I turned to them slowly. "No," I said, "he did." At the station, I sat across from Ethan in the waiting area. He wouldn't look at me. Good. I didn't want him to see that beneath my control. My chest felt hollow. Daniel arrived 20 minutes later, breathless, eyes wide when he saw the tension in the room. "Lily," he whispered, taking my hand. "Are you okay?" I nodded. But I wasn't. Not really. An hour later, my parents rushed in. Mom's eyes were red. Dad's jaw was tight. "This is too much," she sobbed. "No matter what, he's still your brother." Dad leaned toward me. "He made a mistake. You don't destroy his future over a mistake." I stood up. "He didn't borrow $5, I said calmly. "He committed fraud." Silence. The word hung in the air like a verdict. An officer approached me with paperwork. "Ma'am, would you like to proceed with pressing charges?" I looked at Ethan, at the boy who used to follow me around the backyard when we were kids. At the same person who just turned my house into a nightclub using stolen money. I inhaled slowly. I'd like to speak with my family privately first. The officer nodded and stepped away. Ethan was brought back into the room. He looked smaller now, less confident, but still not apologetic. I didn't sit down. Here's what's going to happen, I said evenly. You will write a statement admitting you used my credit card without permission. You will agree to repay the full $10,200 within 12 months. He opened his mouth to argue. I lifted my hand slightly. And you will move out immediately. My mother gasped. Dad started to protest. But I continued. If you refuse, I press charges, and this becomes a criminal record. Ethan swallowed. For the first time that day, his arrogance cracked. Okay, he muttered. Louder. Okay, he repeated, voice strained. The officer helped formalize the document. Ethan signed it in front of witnesses. I kept the original copy. The next morning, he packed. 3 garbage bags of clothes. That was all. No apology. No eye contact. As he dragged his suitcase down the front steps, my mother clung to me. Please, she begged, just one more chance. I hesitated. For half a heartbeat, I saw him at age 8, crying when he scraped his knee. But then I saw the bank alert. The strobe lights in my living room. The DJ booth in my daughter's home. No, I said softly. And that was the end of Ethan living under my roof. For a few weeks after that, the house felt lighter, quieter. Daniel smiled more. Ava laughed without covering her ears at night. I almost believed the worst was over. Until one evening, after dinner, my parents asked me to sit down. Their expressions were serious. Prepared, like they had rehearsed. Dad cleared his throat. At our age, starting over is difficult, he began. We were wondering if you could contribute $2,000 a month, just as support. I stared at him. I already cover everything, I said slowly. What is the $2,000 for? Mom avoided my eyes. Then Dad slipped. Well, Ethan is still looking for work. The air went cold. So this isn't support, I said. It's funding him. Silence. Daniel didn't say a word this time. He didn't defend them. He didn't mediate. He just watched. And I realized something in that moment. The party wasn't the deepest betrayal. It was just the preview, because my parents still hadn't learned anything. They didn't see what Ethan did as wrong. They saw it as my responsibility. And that realization, it hurt more than the $10,200 ever could. That night, I lay awake staring into the dark. Beside me, Daniel whispered, "You're thinking." Yes. What? I turned toward him. I think it's time to buy back their old house. He blinked slowly. What? If they're struggling so much, I said quietly, we'll secure it ourselves, in our name, with boundaries. Daniel studied me carefully. And if something doesn't add up? I didn't answer right away. But deep down, something already didn't. And I was about to find out just how deep the lie went. The next morning, I didn't go into the office. I told my assistant I'd be working remotely. I needed clarity. I needed numbers. I needed facts, not emotions. At 9 a.m., I called Brandon Miller, an old college friend who now worked in real estate. We'd handled 2 property investments together over the years. He was precise, methodical, the kind of person who didn't miss details. Hey, Lily, he answered casually. What's up? I need you to check something for me, I said. My parents' old house, the one they said was repossessed 3 years ago. There was a brief pause. You thinking about buying it? Maybe, I replied carefully. Can you check who owns it now? Give me a few hours. I hung up and stared at my laptop screen, but I wasn't seeing the spreadsheets in front of me. I was seeing my mother's tears. My father's trembling hands sliding that thick file across my dining table. The stamped documents. The way I barely skimmed them. Because they were my parents. Because I believed them. At 2:17 p.m., my phone rang. Brandon, I answered immediately. His tone wasn't casual this time. Lily, you might want to sit down. I was already sitting, but my spine stiffened. Just tell me. He exhaled softly. The house was never repossessed. My heart skipped. What? It's still under your parents' names. No foreclosure, no bankruptcy filed against that property. The room felt smaller. That's not possible, I whispered. They showed me documents. Whatever they showed you wasn't connected to the house, Brandon continued. And there's more. My hand tightened around the phone. It's currently being rented out. My breath caught. For how much? $2,000 a month. The same number. The exact same number they asked me for as support. I didn't speak. Brandon's voice softened. The current tenant signed a lease 8 months ago. Your dad is listed as the landlord. 8 months. That meant while they were living under my roof, while Daniel was cooking for 6, while I was hiring housekeepers and watching our expenses double, they were collecting rent, $2,000, every month. I let out a dry laugh. It sounded foreign, hollow. Thanks, Brandon, I said quietly. I owe you. You don't owe me anything, he replied. Call me if you need anything. When the line went dead, I just sat there. Not angry. Not yet. Just stunned. I work in finance. I analyze risk for a living. I detect inconsistencies in million-dollar deals. And I missed this because I wanted to believe my parents wouldn't lie to me. Daniel found me still sitting in the office an hour later. He didn't ask right away. He just handed me a cup of coffee and waited. That's what I love about him. He never forces. He lets silence speak first. Finally, I looked up. They never lost the house. He didn't react immediately. They're renting it out, I continued. $2,000 a month for 8 months. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. And they asked you for $2,000. I nodded. The realization settled between us like something heavy and irreversible. They didn't come here because they were homeless, I said quietly. They came because they could. Daniel didn't defend them this time. He didn't search for context. He simply asked, "What do you want to do?" I stood up slowly. "I'm done." That evening, while my parents were out walking in the park like nothing in the world was wrong, Daniel and I packed their things. Carefully, methodically. Suitcases, clothes, toiletries, medication bottles. Everything placed neatly on the front porch. Not thrown. Not destroyed. Just removed. At 4:03 p.m., their car pulled into the driveway. They stepped out laughing about something. Then they saw the porch and froze. I stepped outside. My voice was calm. "You're leaving." My mother blinked. "What?" "The house," I said evenly. "The one you claimed was repossessed. It's still in your name, and you've been renting it out for $2,000 a month." My father's face drained of color. Mom opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. "You lied," I continued, "for almost a year." "It was for Ethan," she whispered finally, tears forming instantly. "He needed help." "No," I cut in gently but firmly. "You chose to lie." My father finally spoke. "We were going to tell you." "When?" I asked. Silence, the kind that answers everything. I stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough to make sure they heard me clearly. "You have 10 minutes. Take your bags and leave. If you refuse, I'll call the police." My mother began crying harder. "Lillian, please, we're your parents." I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a daughter. I felt like someone who had been used. "I gave you 10 months, I said quietly. That was more than enough. I turned around and walked back into the house. The door closed behind me with a solid finality. Through the window, I watched them slowly load their suitcases back into the car. No shouting. No dramatic collapse. Just defeat. When they drove away, Daniel wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was complicated. I wasn't relieved. I wasn't victorious. I was grieving. Not the loss of them, but the loss of the version of my parents I thought I had. The version who wouldn't fabricate bankruptcy, who wouldn't weaponize guilt, who wouldn't look at their daughter and see an income stream. That night, for the first time in almost a year, the house was silent. No television, no tension, no careful conversations behind closed doors. Just Daniel reading beside me. Ava asleep upstairs. Peace. Real peace. But even in that silence, one question kept echoing in my mind. If they could lie about something this big, what else had I never noticed? 2 years have passed since the day I closed the door on my parents. And for the first time in a long time, my home feels like a home again. Daniel and I eat dinner at the table without tension sitting in the empty chairs. Ava does her homework in the living room without turning the volume up to drown out adult arguments. The air feels lighter. Not perfect, but safe. I come home from work on time now. I'm not calculating how many extra groceries we need or how much the water bill has jumped. Daniel's boutique is doing well. He hums when he cooks again. We laugh more. We sleep better. But peace, I've learned, doesn't erase history. About 3 months after my parents moved back into their lost house, the one that was never lost, the messages started. At first, they were short. "Hope you're doing well. Tell Ava we miss her." Then the calls. I didn't answer. Then, one Saturday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I opened it. Mom stood there holding a box of pastries. Dad held a small stuffed animal. Their faces looked softer, smaller somehow. "Lillian," Mom said gently, "we just want to see Ava. We're family. It's all in the past." All in the past. I looked at the pastries, at the toy, at the carefully rehearsed expressions of regret. Behind me, Daniel stood quietly in the hallway, not interfering, not pushing, just watching me, waiting for my choice. Mom's voice trembled slightly. "She's our granddaughter. We're her flesh and blood." Flesh and blood. The same words they used when defending Ethan. The same argument they used when asking for money. I felt something twist inside me, because they weren't wrong. They were Ava's grandparents. But they were also the people who lied for 10 months straight. The people who let their daughter believe they were homeless while collecting rent. The people who watched their son steal from me and asked me to protect him from consequences. Daniel stepped closer, speaking softly. Maybe supervised visits, he offered carefully. Just in the yard, with us there. I could hear the sincerity in his voice. Daniel believes in second chances. He believes people can change. And maybe they can. But change requires accountability. And in 2 years, I had never once heard my father say, "We were wrong." I had never once heard my mother say, "We used you." All I'd heard were softer versions of the same script. It was for Ethan. We didn't have a choice. We're family. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "We're not ready for that," I said calmly. Mom's face crumpled. "Not ready? It's been 2 years." "Time doesn't erase trust," I replied. Dad's tone shifted slightly. Not angry, but defensive. "So you're punishing us forever?" Punishing. That word again. As if boundaries were weapons. I shook my head slowly. "I'm protecting my daughter." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "From us?" I held her gaze. "Yes." Silence stretched between us. For a moment, I saw the flicker of something in her eyes. Not anger. Not manipulation. Something closer to realization. But it passed quickly. Dad placed the stuffed animal gently on the doorstep. "We'll be here when you change your mind," he said. I didn't answer. I watched them walk back to their car. The same car that once arrived with suitcases piled high. The same driveway where I once believed their story without question. When I went back inside, Daniel was waiting. "You're sure?" he asked quietly. I nodded. He wrapped his arms around me. And this time, I didn't feel hollow. I felt steady. Because forgiveness isn't the same as access. And love isn't the same as trust. Over the past 2 years, my parents have tried again. More texts, holiday cards, even showing up once with birthday balloons for Ava. Each time, I've kept the boundary. Not out of hatred, not out of revenge, but because I've learned something the hard way. When someone shows you they're willing to exploit your compassion, believing they won't do it again doesn't make you kind. It makes you vulnerable. Sometimes I lie awake at night and wonder if I was too harsh. If maybe cutting them off completely was extreme. If Ava will one day ask why she doesn't know her grandparents. And when that day comes, I'll tell her the truth. That I chose stability over guilt, honesty over appearances, and protection over obligation. So now I want to ask you, was I wrong? Was I too cold for refusing to forgive my parents? Or is there a point where protecting your own family becomes more important than preserving the illusion of one? I still don't know the perfect answer, but I know this. My house is peaceful. My daughter feels safe. And for now, that's enough.